Hello everyone, I hope this recorded lesson finds all of you well. My name is Nancy and I'm currently a high school student. My goal today is to introduce you to an incredible competition, the Hellenic Young Naturalists Tournament, which is organized each year by the Hellenic Physical Society, as well as its international equivalent. This is lesson number 1 out of a series of lessons where we familiarize ourselves with the competition and hopefully get ready to succeed in the competition. So without further ado, let's see what topics we will be covering in today's lesson. First of all, we will be raising and answering a really important question to our understanding of the competition, which is, what is the Hellenic Young Naturalists Tournament and its international equivalent? Is it a team competition? Who can participate and what does the competition test you upon? After we familiarize ourselves a bit with the competition, we will be covering what happens before and during the tournament, but more of that later. Let's see what is the Hellenic Young Naturalists Tournament and what it is all about. So, according to the official site of the international competition, the International Young Naturalists Tournament, or I.Y.N.T for short, is a team competition for school students in their ability to solve research problems of natural sciences, convincingly present their solutions, and defend them in scientific discussions called science fights. But let's decompose the statement a bit. First of all, it talks about the competition being a team competition, but what teams are we talking about? We're talking about teams of 6 members, and only students who are between 12 and 16 can actually participate. Moving on, the statement actually talks about the problems that the students are tested upon, which are of natural sciences, meaning physics, biology, chemistry, etc. And it finishes off with the objective of the competition, which is for students to solve problems, which happens before the tournament, and then present and also defend their solutions to the problems, and in what is known as a science fight. What is covered in purple is meaning the solution of the problems, happens before the tournament, and the presentation and defense of the solution happens during the tournament. Okay, so we briefly saw what the objective of the competition is: solving problems, presenting solutions, and defending them. But what kind of problems are we talking about? What are those problems like? Do they look anything like what we're tested in school? Well, actually, no. Each year, 17 problems are actually published. Let's take a look at one of them. The problem states that a human can jump with straight legs, however, so-called squat jumps and counter movement jumps may be higher. What we have to investigate in this particular problem is the influence of starting postures and jumping techniques on the maximum height of the jump. This might seem really weird to be a problem on a science competition, and it is, but there is a way for you to solve it. I like to think of the problem-solving approach as a triangle of verbs. So you can see here that the verb on the upper angle of the triangle is hypothesize. So what do we hypothesize about? In this particular problem, you need to hypothesize about how starting postures and jumping techniques can affect the maximum height of the jump. Someone could hypothesize that the lower the squat is, the higher the actual height of the jump is. This is a hypothesis, and it is based on common sense. But common sense won't get us very far. We need to research. We need to theoretically support our predictions and our problem. So our problem needs theoretical background. But once again, that's not enough. What is the most important thing of a particular solution to a problem is the experimentation. Why? Because it's our own personal contribution. Because it is our own personal contribution to the problem. What we did. The theory is usually derived by literature, meaning sources from universities, things like that. But the experimentation is ours. This is what we do in order to come up with some conclusions. So you need to experiment. You need to vary in this particular problem. For example, the starting postures and the jumping techniques. Take a lot of people, make them jump in different ways, and see what happens. See how high they can jump. Things. You will come up with some conclusions, and when you come up with conclusions, you need to actually create a PowerPoint where you present your work, present your hypothesis, present your theoretical background, your experimental model, your conclusions, everything. And this is your work essentially. This is the work that you do before the tournament. So what happens during the tournament? One of the objectives of the competition, as we previously saw, is presenting your solutions. So that happens during the tournament. You're given 8 minutes to actually present your work. When you present your work, you are called a reporter. However, simply presenting your work is not enough. As we saw, defending your solutions is another thing that you need to do. But why would we have to defend our solutions? In order to defend something, you probably need an attack. So who's attacking our solution? Fun fact, there is actually someone attacking your solution, and they are called an opponent. The opponent is actually supposed to actually critique your work, evaluate it, and attack it in a polite manner, of course. But we also have another team, which is called the reviewer, which is actually supposed to evaluate both of you. So both the reporter and the opponent. When it comes to the reporter, they evaluate their work, their solution to the problem, how well they defend it. And when it comes to the opponent, they actually evaluate how they critique your work. But how do those roles interact? We have lots of interactions during the competition, so let's break them down. First interaction is what is known as the challenge by the opponent, and it takes 1 minute. What happens here is that the opponent actually challenges you to present a certain problem. For instance, they could ask you to present problem number 12. If you as a reporter has solved this certain problem and think that your solution to the problem is good enough to be presented, then you will probably accept it. If you don't think so, you could reject the problem and the challenge happens once again. So the opponent has to ask you to present another problem and another problem until you finally accept a certain problem. But let's assume that you have accepted the first problem they have asked you to present. So you say, I accept the challenge. After accepting the challenge, you need to prepare to actually present your work. This preparation is both psychological, as you can see here, come on bro, you got this, but it is also very technical. You need to connect your device to a certain projector, you need to get your presentation going, all these things. All of this has to happen in 3 minutes. When you're finally done with your preparation, you actually get to present your work. After you present your work, the opponent comes on stage once again and they make some clarifying questions. What do those clarifying questions sound like? For example, the opponent could ask, what device did you use to measure XYZ? What was the temperature in the room while you did your experimentation? How many times did you conduct the experiment? Very short, apt questions, straight to the point, that actually are designed to clarify. After these questions are actually answered, which happens in a matter of 2 minutes, the opponent comes back to their team in order to finalize their critique to your work. So they create a PowerPoint presentation where they evaluate both your theoretical and experimental model, and they're given 3 minutes to do that. So then we have the statement by the opponent, meaning the opposition, the presentation of the opponent, you can call it whatever you want. We have 4 minutes to do that, and then the reporter comes back on stage and in order to discuss with the opponent. This is the longest interaction between the opponent and the reporter. So it's very critical when it comes to your score. The opponent has to lead the discussion, they have to ask questions, and they need to support their opinions, to ask you questions, ask for your opinion on certain things, and also tell their own opinion, which is really important. And the reporter simply has to defend the solution, answer to some clarifying questions that perhaps arise mid-discussion, and things like that. For the first time, the reviewer's team makes an appearance. The reviewer now gets 2 minutes to ask some clarifying questions to both of you. As I said many times before, the reviewer evaluates both of you, so he questions both of you. After the questioning is done, he comes back to his team in order to prepare. He is given 2 minutes to do that, less than the opponent was given, because the reviewer has lots of time to prepare their critique and their evaluation, and then we have the statement by the reviewer, which is very similar to the statement by the opponent. After the statement by the reviewer is done, we have what is called as concluding remarks. So the concluding remarks are perhaps the last chance that the opponent and reporter get in order to defend their thesis. So whether they believe the presentation and the solution to the problem is valid or not, they have to make it clear and they have to convince the jury that their thesis is right. So they are given 1 minute each to do that. Very small amount of time, so it needs to be apt, short, and straight to the point. All the interactions that I just described are what constitute a whole stage, but each science fight has 3 stages. We have the same teams, the same group of 3 teams. However, the roles change in a circular manner. So you see here that the person that was previously the opponent now becomes the reporter, and the person that was previously the reviewer becomes the opponent, and the person who was previously the reporter becomes the reviewer. So each science fight has 3 stages. But how many science fights are there? If we go back to the problem set, you will see that the problems are divided in 3 categories. We have the main problems for Science Fight 1, we have the main problems for Science Fight 2, and we have the problems invent yourself for Science Fight 3. I think this division is pretty telling of the fact that there are 3 science fights in total. However, there are 2 hidden science fights that you are not seeing here. If your team is good enough in order to qualify for the semifinals, meaning that they're in the top 9, then you will play an additional science fight. If you happen to be the best team out of the 3 ones that are actually competing in the 4th science fight in your particular group, then you qualify for the finals. So we have an additional 5th exciting science fight that you will participate if you're in the top 3 out of all of the teams that participate in the tournament. With enough preparation and hard work, I hope that you can achieve this, because the 5th science fight is the most exciting out of all of them, the finals, right? Hopefully this recorded lesson gave you some insight on the competition. I really hope it was helpful, and I really wish all of you the best on your preparation. Thank you guys for your attention and time. I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye guys!